I'm going to introduce how Revit works with visibility graphics, and that is a topic relating to how Revit is actually displaying the information for you on the screen, and also how it will print out on the sheets that you're producing. So there's a lot to go over here. I'm just going to cover the basics and the sort of general hierarchy of how things get represented in Revit. Again, understanding that a lot of this is a trial and error process, and that we're sort of in a sandbox mode, so there's no sort of right or wrong way to do things at this point. It's all about understanding how to effectively communicate the information we're trying to communicate. So speaking of that hierarchy, Revit has sort of global parameters or global associations with things, and then it has view-specific associations with these things. So if you don't have any view-specific overrides for how your elements are displayed, Revit will utilize what's called an object style, and that's found under Manage Object Styles. To give you an example of how this works, we're going to look up the walls. And this has less to do with its actual projection color because we do have some materials applied. It has more to do with its line weights and line colors. So in your orthographic drawings or your 2D plans or elevations, you'll probably notice more of an effect on the object styles than in your 3D views. But let's look at the line weights of our walls. Let's change the projection weight to something pretty heavy and hit apply, and now you can see that because this view has no view template applied and there's no overrides in the view, Revit is utilizing this sort of 14 projection line weight. I'm going to hit OK, and that means that essentially every wall in our views, if they don't have an override, is going to be projecting with a 14 line weight. To individually override by the view, which you're going to be utilizing much more, is you can hit VV to go into visibility graphics. We can search walls here, and we can change this weight to, let's say, a 7. And now you can see that this is the next step in the hierarchy. Rather than the global overrides, we've gone to a view-specific override. We can also see that we can change the patterns here. The projection and the cut pattern. So if you're cutting through something, you'll utilize this pattern and cut line. And if you're projecting something, or if you're looking at something, you can change it in the projection surface. So let's change this pattern to a solid fill, and let's make it black. Hit OK, and once we hit apply, you can see that everything has changed except for this one wall. I'm going to change the lines to a white color so I can see them against the black projection. Hit apply, and now we can take a look at this wall. So the next level of hierarchy is the individual element override in each specific view. So if there's an element that I just need to override once, or I want to quickly change the appearance of, you can always go into the view, you can right click it and override the graphics in view by element. So here you can see I've applied a surface pattern already. That's this color teal with a solid fill. And I can change this to a red. Hit apply. You can see it will change there. And I can also reset the elements overrides here and hit apply. And it will jump back to the view element, the view specific overrides. The last two major categories governing how your view is displayed in Revit are visual styles and materials. We're not going to go super in-depth on materials here, but when we get to the later visual styles, you'll see that they're governed by materials, and that will be a later tutorial where we'll cover it more in depth. To see how a view's visual style is being dictated, you can go to the view or the view template and check the visual style box here, and you can see the graphics display option, but you can also see that there are some preset modes, and you'll have to basically choose from one of these. And they're sort of like overarching, super categories of how you can control the graphics display. So to briefly go over these, wireframe is traditional wireframe where it's using both your object and visual styles of the view and seeing through the surfaces, so the surfaces don't obstruct the lines. We also have a hidden line mode, which by default is sort of a black and white mode with no shadows, but we can turn shadows on and off here. A shaded mode will start to bring in usually more color if there are colors associated with the appearance of some of your objects. Consistent colors is very close to shaded, but it affects transparency a little bit more, and there's a little bit less to do with the ambient light of the model. And when we get into textures and realistic, you can see that there's a more radical change in that it's showing the material properties and appearance of your materials. If you have a view template applied, keep in mind that you can't actually change the visual style or the graphics display options. You have to go to your view template to change them. It's not a view specific change that you can make. You're making changes to all of the view templates. So to change the overrides by model, you would go to VG Overrides Model, change things here. To change how shadows are affected, you would change it here. And to change your model display, that is your visual style, you would go to Model Display under Style and change it here. Let's change it to Textures. And now we can talk a little bit about materials. So there's a couple ways to figure out what materials are associated with your objects. The easiest way to do that is to select an object that you want to learn more about how its material is working. Looking over in the properties and hitting Edit Type. Now, a lot of the walls you're going to be using are generic layups, so they're not necessarily assemblies, meaning that if we look at its construction parameters under Structure and we hit Edit, there's only a single material associated with it here. This material is effectively what we're seeing. So this is a wood board wall that I created for the exterior, and you see that it looks like wood boards, and that's because I have a wood board siding material associated with it. This will be a later tutorial where we'll talk about the graphics and appearance identity in your material browser. But for right now, you can play around with some of the default materials. Let's change this to a red material. And now you can see that that material's characteristics are now overriding any of the walls in the project that are of the family type wood board exterior 8. But if I go back to change the view type properties under the view template, I'll change the model display to, rather than textures, go to shaded. Now you can see it goes back to black because this is not necessarily displaying its material properties, but its graphical qualities, which we've overridden in the view template overrides.